With question 47 of Secunda Secundae, we go now into the Treatise on the Cardinal Virtues. And as you can see, this is a big treatise from question 47 all the way to 170. I think this is the largest of all of the parts of the Summa Secunda Secundae. And also this question 47 is really long as well. There are 16 articles in this question. And so this is going to be a bit of a haul, but it's an important one. And I want to just say that as we're going through these questions of the Summa, I have mentioned that we're looking for overall themes, kind of universal teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas. And I think what I've come to the conclusion of is that the Summa is really about the person. And by that, I mean the human being as a person, which means that we are the only visible creature that has intellect and will made to the image and likeness of God. And being a person is a great privilege, all right? It puts us in a very elite group of beings with God as three persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and then the angels, every single angel being a person and its own species because it doesn't have a material element to it. And so let's keep that in mind, that this is about the person. This is about you and me. This is about, in the treatise on the Cardinal Virtues, about perfecting ourselves in our life down here below, whereas the theological virtues, the object of which was God himself, was about uniting us directly to God. And so theological virtues are higher, and then the cardinal virtues are how we're going to ordain ourselves in order to not go astray through the passions or through injustice or something like that. And so anyways, we're going to be in this treatise for quite some time, and I hope you enjoy it because this is going to be a long haul, but it is quite interesting. Let's get into the 16 articles now, and this is, again, the treatise on the Cardinal Virtues, question 47 of Prudence, what he says, considered in itself. And Article 1 says, is prudence in the cognitive or in the appetitive faculty? And he said, it is manifest that prudence belongs directly to the cognitive and not to the sensitive faculty. It has to do with reason. Okay, prudence is applying right reason to actions, right? Things that we do where, do they conform to reason? And that's what prudence is going to be all about. All right, there we go. We got one article under our belt, 15 more to go. Whether prudence belongs to the practical reason alone or also to the speculative reason. And remember, practical has to do with operations. It has to do with individual operations and activities, whereas speculative has to do with the contemplation of truth, okay, much more at a higher level. And he's going to conclude here that prudence resides only in practical reason, okay? Prudence is what we apply to individual situations in order that those situations can conform to reason. Article 3, whether prudence takes cognizance of singulars. Well, of course, yes, definitely, because individual actions is what is concerned, okay? Individual actions of how we're going to apply the virtue of prudence to it. And is prudence a virtue? It's funny that he gets all the way to Article 4 before he gets into this, because obviously it is. It's one of the four cardinal virtues. It's an intellectual virtue, right? And so it's a very key virtue. He says, virtue is that which makes its possessor good and his work good likewise. Now, good may be understood in a twofold sense: materially, for a thing that is good; secondly, formally, under the aspect of good. Now, this is very important. Sounds kind of deep, but materially is the actual the drawing to something of something particular, and the formal aspect means the aspect of good. Where you understand the goodness of it, and not just that you're drawn to it primarily through a sensitive appetite, like you're drawn to pizza because, just like your dog would be drawn to it. But a human being has an ability to know the kind of the formal aspect of goodness. All right, the pizza is good. It's not just something that I desire from a sensitive aspect. Good under the aspect of good. Okay, good under the aspect of good is the object of the appetitive power, okay? Desire, appetitive power. Hence, if any habits rectify the consideration of reason without regarding the rectitude of the appetite, they have less of the nature of a virtue, since they direct man to good materially, that is to say, to the thing which is good, but without considering it under the aspect of good. On the other hand, those virtues which regard the rectitude of the appetite have more of the nature of virtue, because they consider the good not only materially, but also formally. In other words, they consider that which is good under the aspect of good. Does that make sense? Now, it belongs to prudence to apply right reason to action, and this is not done without a right appetite. Hence, prudence has the nature of virtue, not only as the other intellectual virtues have it, but also as the moral virtues have it, among which virtues it is enumerated. So it's a moral virtue, it's an intellectual virtue, it's a cardinal virtue. It's kind of like all the virtues, right? So hopefully that made sense. Article 5, whether it is a special virtue. Any habit that has a corresponding special object distinct from other objects must needs be a special habit, and if it be a good habit, it must be a special virtue, okay? Because remember we went through the habits. That actually was, interestingly, one of the most difficult parts of the Summa, talking about habits back in Prima Secunda. Accordingly, we must say that since prudence is in the reason, differentiated from the other intellectual virtues by a material difference of objects. All right, so now he's going to go through the intellectual virtues. Wisdom, knowledge, and understanding are about necessary things. Okay, necessary things, high level. Whereas art and prudence are about contingent things. Contingent just means we could go one way or the other. Art being concerned with things made, that is, with things produced in external matter, such as a house, a knife, and so forth, and prudence being concerned with things that are done. Okay, that's the difference between prudence and art: things made or things done. That is with things that have their being in the doer himself. On the other hand, prudence is differentiated from the moral virtues according to a formal aspect distinctive of powers, that is, the intellective power wherein is prudence, and the appetitive power wherein is moral virtue. Hence it is evident that prudence is a special virtue distinct from the other virtues. What he's going to do is, eventually we're going to get into this, is that whenever there's a moral virtue, there has to be an intellectual virtue as well. And that prudence has to apply right reason to the moral virtue, like chastity or temperance or something like that. And I think that's why he's saying this is a special virtue, because it applies right reason to actions. It's a high level intellectual type of virtue. Whether prudence appoints the end to moral virtues. He said the end of moral virtues is human good. Now, the good of the human soul is to be in accord with reason, as Dionysius says, wherefore the ends of moral virtues must of necessity pre-exist in the reason. Isn't that interesting? The ends pre-exist in the reason. Okay, it's like a priori almost, like they're already there. Now, just as in the speculative reason, there are certain things naturally known about which is understanding. Okay, we kind of know it, just it's in us. And certain things of which we obtain knowledge through them, conclusions about which is science. So in the practical reason, certain things pre-exist as naturally known principles, and such are the ends of the moral virtues, since the end is in practical matters what principles are in speculative matters. So it's almost like he's saying that there's a certain, maybe it has to do with the natural law, that we know kind of what to do. And is he saying that if this is pre-existing, the prudence is what applies the reason that we have, the pre-existent kind of knowledge of right and wrong, to particular circumstances, particular actions? It seems that's what he's saying. While certain things are in the practical reason by way of conclusions, and such are the means which we gather from the ends themselves. About these is prudence, which applies universal principles to the particular conclusions of practical matters. Consequently, it does not belong to prudence to appoint the end to moral virtues, but only to regulate the means. And so now that I read that last sentence, it sounds like the ends are in us, and then prudence takes particular situations, particular actions, and applies from that knowledge, maybe that's innate in us of right and wrong, to the particular circumstances through the means. That's what it sounds like to me. What do you think about that? Article 7, whether it belongs to prudence to find the mean in moral virtues. And he says it belongs to the ruling of prudence to decide in what manner and by what means man shall obtain the mean of reason in his deeds. For though the attainment of the mean is the end of a moral virtue, yet this mean is found by the right disposition of those things that are directed to the end. So the prudence helps us find the mean. Article 8. All right, we're getting close to the halfway point. Command is the chief act of prudence. And what he's going to say here, okay, prudence is right reason applied to action, as we said. That which is the chief act of reason in regard to action must be the chief act of prudence. There are 3 such acts. The first is we take counsel. Okay, and that belongs to discovery. Okay, we kind of take counsel about what the situation is. The second act is to judge of what one has discovered. Okay, you counsel and then you judge and then you command. So the chief act of prudence is to command the action. Okay, you make a decision and you command it. Article 9 says whether solicitude belongs to prudence. According to Isidore, a man is said to be solicitous through being shrewd and alert, insofar as a man, through a certain shrewdness of mind, is on the alert to do whatever he is to be done. Now, this belongs to prudence, whose chief act is to command about what has already been counseled and judged in matters of action. So, yes, solicitude belongs to prudence. Article 10, whether solicitude belongs to the governing of many. Okay, so now he's talking about solicitude, which has to do with, shrewdness and alertness, right? And does it belong to the governing of many? He said some have held that prudence does not extend to the common good, but only to the good of the individual, and this because they thought that man is not bound to seek other than his own good. But he says since it belongs to prudence to counsel, judge, and command concerning the means of obtaining a due end, is it evident that prudence regards not only the private good of the individual, but the common good of the multitude. Okay, so prudence could be used by a ruler over, the common good for, many people, and it's not just individual particular actions. Whether prudence about one's own good is specifically the same as that which extends to the common good. And he's going to say that, no, there's different kinds of prudence. He says there's something called prudence simply called, which is directed to one's own good, domestic prudence, which is directed to the common good of the home, and political prudence, which is directed to the common good of the state or the kingdom. And so those are all very different. He's going to say they're not all exactly the same, and so they really have different species altogether. Number 12, other prudences in subjects or only in rulers, and he's going to say primarily in rulers, but since even subjects are rational creatures, they are also going to have prudence applied to them as well. Article 13, can prudence be in sinners? Can a sinner be prudent? He says prudence is threefold. There is a false prudence, which takes its name from its likeness to true prudence. For since a prudent man is one who disposes well of the things that have to be done for a good end, whoever disposes well of such things as are fitting for an evil end has false prudence in far as that which he takes for an end is good, not in truth but in appearance. He gives the example of a good robber. Okay, a good robber is good at what he does, but it's only an apparent good. It's not a real good. The second prudence is indeed a true prudence because it devises fitting ways of obtaining a good end, and yet it is imperfect. First, because the good which it takes for an end is not the common end of all human life, but of some particular affair, as when a man devises fitting ways of conducting business or of sailing a ship. Okay. Secondly, because he fails in the chief act of prudence, as when a man takes counsel aright and forms a good judgment, even about things concerning life as a whole, but fails to make an effective command. Okay, so you counsel, you judge, but you don't command. Okay, so you don't get all the way there. The third prudence is both true and perfect, for it takes counsel, judges, and commands aright in respect of the good end of man's whole life, and this alone is prudence simply so called, and cannot be in sinners, whereas the first prudence is in sinners alone, while imperfect prudence is common to good and wicked men. All right, that was a long way to get to that one. Number 14, is prudence in all who have grace. This is a very interesting first sentence here. He says, the virtues must needs be connected together, so that whoever has one has all. I've never quite understood that. You either have all of them or you have none of them. Now, whoever has grace has charity, so that he must needs have all the other virtues. And hence, since prudence is a virtue, as shown above, he must of necessity have prudence also. So I'm thinking about somebody who, let's say, has the gift of chastity. You know, they're chaste, but then they are stingy. You know, so can't you have one virtue and not the other? Those two don't seem to be related to each other, but I don't know, maybe they are. Article 15, whether prudence is in us by nature. He's going to say no. You know, now it's, well, let's go ahead and read this. It's kind of long, but it's interesting. It's already a long video, right? He says, prudence includes knowledge both of universals and of the singular matter of actions to which prudence applies universal principles. Accordingly, as regards the knowledge of universals, the same is to be said of prudence as of speculative sciences, because the primary universal principles of either are known naturally. Okay, so the universal principles are known naturally, except that the common principles of prudence are more connatural to man. Okay, whereas the secondary universal principles, whether of the speculative or of the practical reason, are not inherited from nature, but are acquired by discovery through experience or through teaching. On the other hand, as regards the knowledge of particulars, which are the matters of action, we must make a further distinction, because this matter of action is either an end or the means to an end. Now, the right ends of human life are fixed, wherefore there can be a natural inclination in respect of these ends. Okay, we all want to be happy. We all will the good. That some from natural inclination have certain virtues whereby they are inclined to right ends. But the means to the end in human concerns, far from being fixed, are in manifold variety according to the variety of persons and affairs. All right, so the means, which is what prudence is really associated with, are contingent. They're not fixed. The end may be fixed and the universals may be fixed, but not the individual actions. So he concludes, prudence is not about the ends, but about the means. It follows that prudence is not from nature. Okay, we're not naturally prudent. And finally, whether prudence can be lost through forgetfulness. Forgetfulness regards knowledge only, wherefore one can forget art and science so as to lose them altogether, because they belong to the reason. But prudence consists not in knowledge alone, but also in the act of the appetite. Its principal act is one of command, whereby a man applies the knowledge that he has to the purpose of appetition and operation. Hence, prudence is not taken away directly by forgetfulness, but rather is corrupted by the passions. Nevertheless, forgetfulness may hinder prudence, insofar as the latter's command depends on knowledge which may be forgotten. All right, well, that is the end of this long question with 16 articles on prudence. I don't presume to think that a lot of you stayed for the entire thing, but maybe you are. And if so, thank you for hanging with me through this whole thing. And we are just beginning this long treatise on the cardinal virtues, but it's going to be great because we're going to go through prudence and justice and temperance and fortitude. These are the nuts and bolts of the good life that we can cultivate through the acquiring and these habits that we can have, these virtues that all hinge on these 4 cardinal virtues. All right, thanks for watching. God bless you.